Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into a pretty fascinating intersection today. Genetics, Islamic law, and the world of tattoos.
Oh, yeah, it's a really interesting mix of
Yeah,
topics.
we've got scientific papers, we've got religious interpretations, we've got legal opinions. Um, so we're really going to try to see how these seemingly separate fields kind of bump up against each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's amazing how they all come together.
So let's kick things off with kind of the foundation of it all, DNA.
Yeah.
We hear DNA is the blueprint of life, but I'm curious what your take is on that.
Well, each cell in your body, even the ones that are right next to each other, have a complete set of your DNA.
Real
It's like they each hold a unique library of information, a blueprint that guides its specific functions.
Okay, that's pretty incredible. It's like every cell is its own little universe of information.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
within those universes are the chromosomes, which are those tightly packed bundles of DNA.
Okay.
Think of them as the master organizers, making sure that genetic information is passed down accurately when cells divide.
Chromosomes are the organizers, and DNA is the blueprint. But sometimes that blueprint isn't perfect, right?
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are, variations or mutations in our genes that can lead to health issues, and that's what we call genetic diseases.
Okay.
And the crazy thing is the rate at which we're discovering them. I mean, back in 1994, scientists had already identified more than 7,000 genetic diseases,
7,000.
and that list just keeps growing.
Wow. That just makes you realize how much we still don't know and how this knowledge is constantly evolving.
Yeah, for sure.
But knowing more about genetics also raises some questions too, especially when you start to think about family planning.
For sure, like premarital genetic testing,
Yeah.
it's becoming more and more common, but there are so many different viewpoints on whether it should be mandatory, especially in the context of Islamic law.
That's a really interesting point because on the one hand, you can say that knowing about potential genetic risks could really help couples make informed decisions. But I can also see why some people, especially from a religious perspective, might be a little bit hesitant.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the sources we're looking at focuses on Islamic law and argues really strongly against making premarital genetic testing mandatory,
All right.
because there are financial burdens to consider, of course. But there's also the psychological stress of, knowing you might carry a gene for a serious illness.
Right. It's not just about the science. It's about the human impact of having that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the ethical side of things, too, like the right to privacy. Who should have access to this very sensitive genetic information?
Right.
Should it be shared with potential spouses, with families, or even employers?
That's a great point.
These are tough questions with no easy answers.
It's like opening Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Once you have this knowledge, it's hard to put it back in.
Mm.
So while genetic testing can prevent suffering, it also comes with its own set of dilemmas.
For sure, both ethical and societal.
What about things like discrimination based on genetic information?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge concern right now.
Could employers refuse to hire someone because their genes say they might be predisposed to certain illnesses?
Yeah.
Or could insurance companies deny coverage?
I mean, those are some of the fears surrounding all of this, and that's why a lot of people are calling for strong legal protections to make sure that, this kind of information is used responsibly and ethically.
It's almost like Spider-Man's uncle. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
And this idea of responsibility and choice also kind of takes us to our next topic, tattoos.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that seems like it's a world away from genetics,
Yeah.
but I'm sensing a connection here.
There is. While the science is different, the themes are very much connected. Bodily autonomy, personal choice, and religious interpretation.
I see it. So where does Islamic law stand on the topic of tattoos?
Well, one of our sources is very clear. Tattooing is strictly prohibited in Islam.
Okay.
The traditional understanding is that it involves puncturing the skin and then inserting permanent pigments.
So is it the permanence of it that makes it a problem? The altering of God's creation?
Yeah, you're getting it. It's about respecting the body as a gift from God and not altering it in ways that are seen as harmful or disrespectful.
Okay. And how seriously is this prohibition taken?
Very seriously. There's actually a hadith, a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, that states that God curses both the person who gives the tattoo and the person who receives it.
Wow.
So it's a pretty powerful statement that shows just how strongly this practice is condemned.
It makes you think about why we choose to modify our bodies in the first place. Is it for self-expression or societal pressure or something deeper?
Exactly. It's about examining our motivations and, figuring out if our actions align with our values.
Now, what about tattoo removal?
Oh, that's a good one.
Because if getting a tattoo is forbidden, wouldn't removing one be encouraged?
Yeah, you'd think so. And in most cases, that's true. Our source says that removing a tattoo is actually required for the deceased if it's possible to do it without disfiguring the body.
So even in death, there's an attempt to restore the body to its natural state.
Yeah, it shows how important that principle is in the Islamic tradition.
And for the living, is removing a tattoo obligatory?
It is if it can be done without causing any harm.
So it's not just a one-time decision.
Okay.
It's an ongoing commitment to try to rectify that alteration.
Yeah.
Okay. But now I'm curious about these new types of tattoos that are becoming popular, the ones that fade over time.
Oh, yeah.
Do those change things at all?
They totally do. That's actually a really great example of how new technology forces us to re-examine our traditional interpretations. These third-layer tattoos, as they're called. Well, they bring up a whole new set of questions.
Yeah, so how are these third-layer tattoos different from the traditional kind?
Instead of putting that pigment deep down in the skin where it stays forever, these tattoos put it in a much shallower layer. And then over time, your body just naturally sheds those skin cells, and the tattoo slowly fades away.
So it's like a semi-permanent tattoo. So does that mean it's okay in Islam because it's not permanently altering the body?
Well, that's the big debate, and it's not a simple answer. While some people argue that the fact that it's not permanent might make it okay, Islamic rulings often consider the intent behind the action, too.
So it's not just about what you do, but why you do it.
Exactly. If someone gets a third-layer tattoo just to make themselves prettier, especially to try and get attention from someone they're attracted to, it could still be seen as not allowed.
Because the intention carries a lot of weight.
Yeah.
So even with this new technology, the basic principles of respecting your body and avoiding actions that might lead to inappropriate interactions, those still matter.
100%. It shows how Islamic jurisprudence really tries to adapt to what's going on in the world today. The principles stay the same, but how they're applied can change as new situations come up.
That's really interesting. It's not just a rigid set of rules. It's more like a dynamic system that tries to balance tradition with the realities of modern life. But let's jump back to genetics for a sec.
Yeah.
We were talking about premarital genetic testing and all the different opinions about whether it's okay. Where does the whole idea of free will fit into all of this?
Oh, that's a great question. Because if our genes sort of predispose us to certain things, does that mean we're less responsible for our choices?
Yeah, it's like, if it's in my DNA, am I really in control?
One of the sources we looked at actually talks about this new field of behavioral genetics, where they're trying to find links between specific genes and our behaviors. It's still really early research, but it brings up a lot of philosophical and ethical questions.
Like, what if scientists found a gene that made someone more likely to become addicted to something, or that influenced other behavioral patterns?
Yeah.
How would that change how we view free will and accountability?
Right. Would it be used as an excuse for certain behaviors?
Yeah.
Or even to discriminate against people based on what their genes say?
Yikes.
Very slippery slope.
It's not just about individual choices either. What about the impact on society as a whole?
One of our sources even goes into the idea of using genetic manipulation to basically improve the human race. Imagine being able to choose what traits your kids would have. Intelligence, athleticism, even morality.
That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
It's fascinating and a little scary at the same time.
Yeah.
Where's the line between doing something responsible and playing God?
That's the big question. Would something like that lead to a world where some genetic traits are seen as better than others?
Right.
Creating new types of inequality and prejudice?
Yeah, and what about all the unintended consequences? We're already seeing that with gene editing in agriculture and medicine.
It definitely shows that we need to approach these advancements very carefully and have open and honest conversations about what they could mean ethically.
It's like we said before, with great power comes great responsibility.
For sure. And those questions of responsibility and choice bring us right back to the discussion about tattoos.
Okay, so we've got this rule against traditional tattoos in Islam, but there's this exception for removing tattoos from the deceased.
Right.
You said it's considered obligatory to remove them if you can do it without messing up the body.
Right.
Why is that so important?
It emphasizes how important it is to return the body to its natural state, even after someone dies. It's acknowledging that our physical bodies are a gift from God and should be treated with respect.
It's a really beautiful concept. It's like we're saying that the human body is sacred both when we're alive and after we die.
Exactly. And it connects to that bigger idea of respecting all of God's creation.
Right.
Just like we're supposed to take care of our bodies while we're alive, we're also reminded to honor them after we pass away.
It makes you think about how our actions can have effects that go way beyond our own lives.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect thought to end on as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive.
Okay.
I hope what we've talked about so far makes you want to keep exploring these intersections of science, religion, and ethics.
It definitely has. And thanks for sharing your insights with us.
Of course. And to everyone listening out there, keep asking those questions, keep learning, and keep having these important conversations because the future really is in our hands. And we can work together to create a world that reflects what we believe in.
So until next time, keep diving deep and keep those curious minds engaged. So we were talking about how Islam encourages removing tattoos even after death.
Right.
But I'm still thinking about these new tattoos that fade over time. Do those fit into this conversation at all?
Oh, absolutely. They really do. It's like technology is making us rethink traditional beliefs. These third-layer tattoos, they bring up so many new questions.
So tell me, how are these third-layer tattoos different from regular ones?
Well, instead of injecting ink deep into the skin where it stays forever, these new tattoos put the ink in a shallower layer. Then over time, your body naturally sheds those skin cells and poof, the tattoo fades away.
So like a temporary tattoo, does that mean it's okay in Islam then, since it's not a permanent change?
That's what people are debating. And it's tricky. You see, some say that because it's temporary, it might be allowed. But Islamic rulings often look at why you're doing something too.
It's not just what you do, but why you do it.
Exactly. So even if someone gets this third-layer tattoo just to look good, especially if it's to attract attention from someone they're interested in romantically, it still might not be okay.
It's like your intention matters a lot.
A lot.
So even with this new technology, the core principles of respecting your body and avoiding things that could lead to wrong actions,
Yeah.
they still apply.
Yes. It's a great example of how Islamic law tries to keep up with the times. The principles stay the same, but how they're applied can change as new things come up.
That's fascinating. It's not just a set of rules. It's more like a living system trying to balance tradition with the realities of today's world.
Okay, but let's switch back to genetics for a minute. We were talking about those premarital genetic tests and the different opinions on them.
Yeah.
How does the whole idea of free will fit into all this?
It's a big question. If our genes make us prone to certain things, does it mean we're not as responsible for making good choices?
It's like, if my DNA says I'm going to be a certain way, do I even have a choice? There's this new field called behavioral genetics that tries to find links between specific genes and how we act. It's early research, but it brings up all sorts of philosophical and ethical questions.
What if they found a gene that made someone more likely to be addicted to something, or that influenced other behavior patterns?
Exactly.
How would that change how we think about free will and being responsible for our actions?
Would it be used as an excuse for bad behavior or to discriminate against people based on their genes?
Scary thought.
It is a very slippery slope.
And it's not just about personal choices either. It's about society as a whole.
One of our sources even talks about using genetic manipulation to actually improve the human race.
Whoa.
Imagine choosing your kids' traits: intelligence, athletic ability, even morality.
It's like a science fiction movie. It's both amazing and a little bit terrifying at the same time.
It is.
Where do we draw the line between responsible actions and playing God?
Exactly. Would it create a world where some genetic traits are seen as better than others, leading to new kinds of inequality and discrimination?
And what about all the unexpected side effects? We're already seeing that with gene editing and agriculture and medicine.
It shows that we need to be really careful with these new technologies and talk openly and honestly about what they could mean ethically.
Like we said before, great power comes with great responsibility.
Definitely. And those questions about responsibility and choice lead us right back to our conversation about tattoos.
Okay, so in Islam, traditional tattoos are a no-go, but there's this exception about removing tattoos from the deceased.
Right.
You said it's actually required to remove them if possible without damaging the body. Why is that so important?
It really emphasizes the importance of returning the body to its natural state even after death. It's about acknowledging that our physical form is a gift from God and deserves respect.
It's a beautiful idea, really. It's like recognizing the sacredness of the human body both in life and in death.
Exactly. And it connects to that bigger idea of respecting everything that God created. Just as we're supposed to take care of our bodies when we're alive, we're also reminded to honor them even after we're gone.
It makes you realize that our actions can have consequences that reach far beyond our own lives.
I think that's a perfect thought to end on as we wrap up this second part of our deep dive.
Okay.
I hope this conversation has made you want to keep learning more about how science, religion, and ethics all intersect.
It definitely has. And thanks again for sharing your knowledge with us.
My pleasure. And to all our listeners, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep having these important conversations. The future is in our hands, and we can work together to create a world that reflects our values.
So until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious. But we're not done yet. We still have a lot more to unpack. So stay tuned for the third and final part of our deep dive, where we'll be exploring even more about genetics, Islamic law, and the fascinating world of tattoos. It's pretty amazing to think that we have the power to shape the future through our choices, both big and small.
Yeah.
But it's also a little overwhelming with all this new stuff in science and technology. It feels like we're at a crossroads.
I get what you mean. We're always running into new possibilities and challenges that make us rethink what we believe and what's important to us, but that's also what makes this such an exciting time. We're not just watching things happen, we're actually shaping the future.
We're writing a new chapter in human history, and we get to hold the pen. But that also means we need wisdom and good judgment. How do we deal with all this unknown territory without losing sight of what really matters?
That's where the conversation between science, ethics, and religion becomes so important. Each perspective brings something valuable to the table, and by talking about it and thinking critically, we can figure out a way forward.
I like that you said critical thinking. It's so easy to get caught up in the hype of new discoveries or those scary headlines. But we have to step back and look at things from different angles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can't just accept everything we hear. We need to ask questions or challenge what we think we know and think about the consequences of what we do. And that means being willing to listen to different viewpoints, even ones we might not agree with at first.
There's rarely one right answer, especially when it comes to complicated things like genetic manipulation or how religious texts are interpreted.
You got it. It's about being okay with those gray areas, admitting that we don't know everything, and being open to learning and changing our minds.
It's a journey, not a destination.
That's it. And it's a journey we're all on together. Scientists, religious scholars, people who study ethics, policymakers. Everyone has a part to play in shaping the future.
And it's not just the experts either. We all have a responsibility to get involved in these conversations and make choices that reflect what we believe in.
So true. Whether it's deciding about premarital genetic testing, understanding the implications of new tattooing methods, or wrestling with the ethical side of gene editing, we're all affected by this.
It's powerful to think that we can actually make a difference, even in small ways.
Our choices, individually and as a society, will shape the world we live in and the legacy we leave behind.
That's a lot to consider.
Yeah.
It reminds me that this isn't just some theoretical discussion. This has real consequences.
Speaking of real consequences, let's go back to tattoos for a minute.
Right.
We talked about how traditional tattooing is prohibited in Islam, but there's that exception for removing tattoos from the deceased.
Right. You said it's required to remove them if you can do it without causing damage. Why is that so important?
It highlights how important it is to return the body to its natural state, even in death. It's recognizing that our physical form is a gift from God, and we should treat it with respect even after someone is gone.
It's a really beautiful concept. It's like acknowledging the sacredness of the human body, both during life and after death.
Exactly. And it goes back to that idea of respecting God's creation. Just like we're encouraged to take care of our bodies while we're alive, we're also reminded to honor them even after we're gone.
It's like our actions have these ripples that go beyond our own lives.
Well said. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up this deep dive. I hope we've inspired you to keep exploring these fascinating areas where science, religion, and ethics come together.
Me too. It's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us.
It's been my pleasure. And to everyone listening, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep having these important conversations. The future is in our hands, and we can create a world that reflects what we believe in.
Beautifully said. So till next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.